Ya,
Hai Eni, salam kenal. Kita belum
Halo Eni.
Nah, kemarin kita ketemu lewat rapat aja itu yang waktu
Ya, Filipina Pak ya.
Ya.
Oh ya.
Philippine situation.
Tapi belum pernah ketemu face to face. Semoga nanti ketemu ya.
Insya Allah.
Sehat semua lah.
Iva, bisa di mirror nggak? Di change mirror? Apa di
Oh, ya.
virtual background? Sehingga nggak kebalik. Aku dan Iva. Okay, so we still wait Andika Wahab, and shortly after that we can start.
Sekarang partisipan udah dimasukin semua nih.
Masuk sendiri langsung atau gimana? Masuk sendiri ya. Tapi kan memang nggak ini kan webinar, jadi nggak bikin noisy.
Itu link YouTube apa?
Link YouTube di grup.
Oh, YouTube udah masuk.
Oh, udah live. Mati dulu. Belum dong, stop dulu belum. Oke lah, nggak apa-apa.
Udah telat ya, dari tadi masuk di YouTube.
Iya.
Saya ngomong masuk ke speaker siapa?
Ya puji gua. Kenapa on?
Sih.
So from how many country we are? Japan, Thailand, and then Hong Kong, okay, and then UK, Australia, Indonesia, of course. Where else? I think Malaysia. We are waiting one more from Malaysia to be in the panel. It's really representing our research basically. That's still missing is Singapore, and where else? Singapore, I guess. South Korea. South Korea will be entering through ambassador. So only Singapore who are not in the panel. It's good combinations of nationality on origin. Then maybe if there is a question, the moderator can pass on.
Time zone, Europe.
Time zone, London, Bangkok is Jakarta, Japan is +9, yeah. I don't know, Australia +12 maybe, plus something.
It's like 4 hours ahead of you, so plus.
Yeah, +11.
11.
+11. So we are already on YouTube of HRWG channel, so be mindful about it.
Bisa share.
Oh, it's on YouTube. YouTube also. Okay.
Yes, Lennon. It is also on YouTube.
So Iva is our MC. Better right after you open, you can direct those who need simultaneous interpreter to Japan will be in Japan channel and Indonesia in Chinese.
Which one is Eva?
Eva?
Ariela Naomi Shiva.
Hello Andika. very on time, punctual. Okay.
Saudaranya si Ani juga belum ada. Want to say hello to Andika?
Ini ada dua. Sorry.
Pak Andika?
Halo Pak Raffendi.
Alhamdulillah.
Sehat.
Voice. Alhamdulillah sehat.
Okay.
Already 2 ya. Let's start ya. Iva, please.
Good afternoon and welcome to the online public discussion and book launch for the new release book entitled Repression and Resilience, COVID-19 Response Measures and Migrant Workers' Rights in Major East and Southeast Asian Destinations. This event is being organized by Human Rights Working Group, Sasakawa Peace Foundation, and Forum Asia. And before we started, I would like to inform that simultaneous interpreters are available. So for Japanese, you can click on the Japanese section. And for Indonesia, you can click on the Chinese section. The aims of this event itself are first, to share findings on policies and public health measures set out by the governments of destinations in East and Southeast Asia during the COVID-19 pandemic and their impacts on migrant workers. In particular, the study looks at 7 destinations, which are Taiwan, Hong Kong, South Korea, Japan, Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand. Secondly, is to discuss the current situations faced by migrant workers in their destinations during the COVID-19 pandemic. And lastly, is to come up with policy recommendation in improving towards an inclusive migration governance in both regions. So in this occasion, we are really privileged to have amazing speakers and commentators here participating with us. And to start off, we are going to be hearing the welcoming remarks from first Mr. Daniel Awigra, the Deputy Director of Human Rights Working Group. Pak Daniel, the Zoom is yours.
A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A crisis is a sign of early state of a transition period. It can be a natural or man-made disaster. It is a crucial and critical momentum in the transformation of the society. Success really depends on our readiness. COVID-19 pandemic is not the exception of such crisis. There are at least 3 main reasons why I think it has to be taken seriously as our common challenges. First, COVID-19 has become a significant part of our history of our generation. The containment of the spread of the virus itself has already shaped our life in less than a year. All necessary effort taken nowadays will become the future histories of our generation. Second, unlike other crises that are easier to invite solidarity, to stand up and deal with the issue together at the global, regional, national, local, or even personal level, during this public health crisis, building a solidarity has become one of the biggest challenges. A public gathering, for instance, in order to express solidarity, to support each other, or to discuss solutions together, can be considered as a breach of a public health protocols. Fines and can be imposed. In addition, there have been stigmatization, discrimination, blaming, and even persecution of others merely because of the association of the disease with a specific group of the people based on their nationality, race, appearance, origin, type of work, and so on and so forth. Third, It is about the politics emerging from the state responding to the pandemic. There have been many political experiments, for the better of worse, taken and implemented in a short period of time in trying to protect the life of population. In these trials and error, there is a tension. Some policies are unprecedented and need to be assessed with a human rights perspective. One of the most vulnerable groups who have been faced those challenges are migrant workers in destination. The study aimed to collect experiences and stories of migrant workers in major labor migrant destinations in East and Southeast Asia in order to assess policies, regulation, and measures taken by the government during this pandemic and their impact on the migrant workers. The question is, will this global pandemic bring a change toward inclusive governance of migrant workers? Ladies and gentlemen, Repression and Resilient, as our title of the book that will be launched today, is the dynamic duo that come at once. In this time of crisis, the option somehow only two, to give up or struggle. Do you want to deal with the pandemic alone or together? In both options, we will be remembered by the future generation. This study is a collective effort with a full dedication and commitment by all researchers, which has trust and support by the migrant community themselves. It has been 6 months of intensive and exercise and work. It has been conducted smoothly with an impressive result. It has successfully come up with proposed guidelines to protect migrant workers during public health crisis as our recommendation based on lessons learned from this exercise. It is for us as a tools of engagement. This proposal suggests to struggle rather than surrender, because the antithesis of pandemic is solidarity and cooperation. For us in Human Rights Working Group, it is part of our cross-regional initiative to build a society across East and Southeast Asia, where human rights of migrants and their family are upheld, respected, protected, and fulfilled, regardless of their race, nationality, gender, age, and administrative status. We have created a platform, we call it BBC, or Better Engagement Between East and Southeast Asia. This hopes to be a place where individual migrants, their family, supporters, and migrant rights advocates can connect, collaborate, and work collectively for making change across borders. I'd like to encourage you all to support and join this initiative. To open and welcome this event on behalf of the organizer, Human Rights Working Group, together with Forum Asia and Sasakawa Peace Foundation, I'd like to extend a special greeting to, first of all, Mr. Itsu Adasisan, the Executive Director of the Sasakawa Peace Foundation, for your trust and support in the last 3 years. Ms. Samini, our friend, the Executive Director of Forum Asia, as a co-host of this event, as well as one of the discussion of this discussion. His Excellency Bapak Umar Hadi, Indonesian Ambassador to South Korea. Of course, in the middle of your tight schedule, you are able to be here as a part of your support for migrant workers' rights advocacy. Anil Lestari, the chairperson of International Migrants Alliance, who will deliver keynote speech. She is migrant worker themselves who've been working 20 years and now become human rights advocate on migrant worker. All speakers, discussion, moderator, and facilitators. Of course, I'd like to thank and congratulate all researchers led by Mariko Hayashi. Congratulations for all your work, hard work, and dedication. And last but not least, of course, for more than 220 registered participants from various backgrounds, organizations, and countries. Have a fruitful public discussion. Thank you so much, and happy International Migrant Day. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Daniel. The next one is the welcoming remark from Mr. Itsu Adachi, the Executive Director of Asian Programs of the Sasakawa Peace Foundation. Mr. Adachi, the online stage is yours.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Adachi, Executive Director of the Sasakawa Peace Foundation. It is my great pleasure to warmly welcome you to this discussion and a book launch of Repression and Resilience, COVID-19 response measures, and migrant workers in major East and Southeast Asian destinations. First of all, I'd like to express my sincere gratitude to Mr. Muhammad Hafiz from Human Rights Working Group and Ms. Shamini and Darshuni Karyemtu from Forum Asia for co-organizing this wonderful event. I'd like to also welcome special guests, Ms. Emi Lestari from IMA and Your Excellency, Mr. Umar Hadi. In March of this year, with the spread of the COVID-19 infection, we started to hear many news reporting on pleas of migrant workers in the ASEAN countries. Their circumstances and policies of receiving countries differ. But when looking at the structural vulnerabilities of migrant workers, there seem to be some commonalities in the challenges and needs they face. We strongly felt the need to have a regional and comprehensive perspectives across East and Southeast Asia, and decided to carry out this research. We'd like to express our deepest gratitude to Mr. Daniel Awigura. Thank you for your warmest message to us. And then Mr. Rafindi Jamin of the Human Rights Working Group for initiating and promoting this research project together with our foundation. In addition, please allow me to express our congratulations to research team for their dedicated work based on their expertise and strong commitment to the issues of migrants. Ms. Mariko Hayashi, who was our foundation's program officer until last year, oversaw the entire research as a research coordinator. The field researchers, including Mr. Lennon Windawan and Dr. Andika Wahab, collected the voices of migrant workers and information in each country. The protracted pandemic has exacerbated the impact of migrant workers. Unfortunately, in Japan too, there are some cases where migrant workers are faced to engage in the sex industry or steel, agriculture, and livestock products. We have to address underlying problems in Japanese receiving mechanism and the deficiencies of Japanese administrative systems, which cannot provide necessary support and protections for migrant workers. The research also revealed that there have been good practices where multi-stakeholders such as governments, business sector, civil society, and migrants communities work collaboratively to support migrant workers in various ways. We think that these positive responses are promising for us, like lighthouses that shine in the stormy seas. I think it would be great if you could learn from such initiatives and individuals and institutions committed to the improvement of the situation of migrant workers, including all of you who take part in this meeting, can work together to bring necessary proposals to the policymakers in the region and improve the situation each other across Asia. Since year 2017, Sasakawa Peace Foundation has been conducting the research focusing on the issues of international migration within the Asian region. In the process, we have always been guided by Human Rights Working Group, starting with the baseline survey on ASEAN consensus on the protection and promotion of the rights of migrant workers. We looked closely at issues including play departure process and staying behind children. I heard that a website initiated by civil society across Asia will be launched. It is difficult for us to meet face-to-face under the pandemic, but I hope that such an online platform will stimulate discussions on this issue and solutions across the region. Finally, I'd like to conclude my welcome remarks with my hope that today's discussion will be stimulating and lively one and can be some encouragement for all of you who are interested and committed for the better and protective societies for migrant workers in Asia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adachi. The last one is from our keynote, Ms. Eni Lestari, the chairperson of International Migrant Alliance. Ibu Eni, the Zoom screen is yours.
Ya, terima kasih. Good afternoon, selamat siang. I would like to express our sincere gratitude to the organizer of today's activity for providing the International Migrants Alliance with this valuable opportunity to deliver a keynote message during the online public and book launch. Let me congratulate the Human Rights Working Group and the team for the successful publication of the study on the migrant workers under COVID-19 pandemic. The findings is now available in a book titled Repression and Resilience, COVID-19 Response Measure and Migrant Workers' Rights in the Major East and Southeast Asian Destination. Tomorrow, 18 December, is the International Migrant Day. It is a very historical day for all migrant workers in the world. It is the day that we, the grassroots migrants, can proudly reclaim a recognition that the migrants are also workers with rights and human beings with feelings and dignity. The adoption of Convention for the Protection of Migrants and the members of their families and the declaration of 18 December as International Migrants Day by United Nations in 1990 is indeed a milestone for the migrants and the migrants movement in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, let me discuss with you what this convention means, which later give the context how important is the publication that HRWG has released for the migrants and the advocates. Number one, our presence and contribution are finally recognized. The number of migrants continue to grow over the decades, and as for now has reached to 260 million, while 65% of them are contractual migrant workers. Migrants work mostly in service sectors, and regardless of our immigration status, we have been contributing greatly to the development of many countries, whether host countries, home countries, and even transit countries. The host and transit countries benefit from the cheap labor of migrants with salary 1/3 of the local worker and less rights, and yet also enrich the social culture of the community. The home countries benefit from the fees collected from migrants, the direct and indirect remittances of migrants, and reduce the number of unemployment back home. That is why many home governments call the migrants economic hero, and an Indonesian official even call us the VVIP. Number two, the violation to our basic rights are urgent problem that must be addressed at national, regional, and international level. Yet despite the endless contribution, the basic human rights of migrants continue to be denied. We are not considered workers, those excluded from labor protection and other laws protecting local workers, and we are tied to the immigration and national security laws. Even when we have little legal rights, those rights can be easily deprived by the other more powerful policies. While the regulation of home countries are more oriented into sending more people abroad under the pretext of globalization and international labor market competition, sadly, protection is the least in their national agenda, and it is proven to be true especially in time of crisis like now. Moreover, up to now, there is no regional legal binding agreement in Asia to protect migrants, and even regional formation like ASEAN has failed to manifest such simple expectation. Thus, the consequences of neglect and denial by policymakers to the migrants are unavoidable. Problem from contractual violation, torture, sexual abuse, confinement, falsification and confiscation of documents, human trafficking and smuggling, imprisonment, death, and so forth continue to persist until now. Number 3, migrants and civil societies have a basis in demanding accountabilities from the government, businesses, and other agencies. With the convention, we now have the ground to demand accountability from those responsible for the miseries of migrants. However, after 30 years of adoption, we all are the living proof that it is not an easy task to do. In fact, until now, there is no clear legal mechanism of accountability when it comes to the protection of migrants, whether at national, regional, and international level. Even if there is one like the Global Compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration offers, but it is highly difficult to access, very bureaucratic, and yet ineffective to address the real problem of migrants. Yet, the Global Compact on Migration and the Global Forum on Migration and Development has weaknesses on its own. While I believe that we must exhaust all avenues, including maximizing what GCM and the GFMD could offer, but we know by heart that they will not address the immediate and pressing issues of migrants on the ground. Brother and sister advocates and supporters of migrants, I lay down the above realities, which also mentioned by the book as a pre-existing problem of migrants before the COVID-19 pandemic, in order to provide us with a bigger picture on why migrants endure such endless exploitative condition and what is the root of it. I sincerely appreciate the effort of the Human Rights Working Group to come up with this report. It gives us an honest documentation on what happened to migrant workers in 7 host countries during the pandemic. So what this book means for us, the migrant workers and migrant movement. Number 1, the book reaffirms the violation to the basic human right of migrants, including the pre-existing problem, as I already explained above, and the newly emerging problem due to the pandemic, such as the issue of relief and assistance to migrants in need, from food to accommodation to safe repatriation during the pandemic, subsidy for terminated and deported migrants, to the arrest and deportation by the government who are using the pandemic as an excuse. Number 2, the importance of self-organized migrants as the first aid in responding the immediate needs of migrants and addressing the prolonged exploitation against the migrants. Through self-help organization, migrants will have a venue to grieve, seek help, engage, and learn, which eventually lead to the empowerment and increase in bargaining power to the employers, agency, and even the government. I appeal to our advocates to treat self-organized migrants group as a partners and not merely beneficiary for your service. Number 3, the role of the advocates, researchers, and supporters in servicing and protecting the migrants' rights are undeniably crucial. The testimonies from different host countries written in the book is an evidence. In time when migrants are defenseless like now, the advocates and supporters are taking the lead in protecting and promoting our cause. They are helping the migrants in whatever forms they can, from providing food, masks, shelter, financial assistance, conducting study, to engaging the host government and embassies on how to best respect the migrants' rights in time of crisis. As consequences, some of the migrants' rights defenders are even being harassed and at risk of prosecution. So what are the ways forward? In my view, the book emphasized 2 major points to us. Number 1, The political will of governments, whether host, home, and transit governments, is urgent at this point to rescue migrants from the worsening health, economic, and political crisis. Recommendations to the government and other policymakers have been listed down in the book, and now it becomes our responsibility, the civil society organization, including self-organized migrants, to pressure those people, the people in the policy making, to do their homework. I believe, based on our experience, it is indeed the most difficult task to do. Number two, the only and perhaps the new way forward in addressing the crisis of migrants in host countries is by creating more inclusive society, which is based on understanding, cooperation, and solidarity. Those many activities must be developed to bridge the communication between migrants and local, trusting in the strength of migrants as a partners, and not only the receiving end of advocacies and effort. And I believe the advocates has a big role as a medium in this part. Ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude my message by thanking each one of you who are present today, the advocates and supporters of migrants, for your dedication to serve the migrants in need and to ensure the well-being of migrants. We do not only fight coronavirus, but we must also fight the virus of social exclusion, discrimination, stigmatization, xenophobia, and militarization against marginalized communities, including the migrants. But I believe there is a solution in every problem, and there is hope in every difficulties that we face. The solution and hope for the migrants during and even post-pandemic is the solidarity given by our supporters, especially in the host countries. Happy International Migrants Day. Thank you and good day to all of us.
Thank you very much, Miss Annie. And thank you for all the warm welcoming remarks. Now it's time to move into the main session, which is the book launch. Will be led by Miss Adeline. So Miss Adeline, the screen is yours.
All right, thank you very much. So this section will be discussing the book that we have finished recently. First, we will be joined with Mariko as a research coordinator who would be doing an overview of the research itself, and then we'll be followed by 2 out of the 7 field researchers that we collaborated with. So Lennon from Taiwan, also Andika from Malaysia. So Mariko, the place is yours.
Thank you very much, Aline. Let me just share my PowerPoint slide first. Can you see my screen? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much, Aline, for moderating this session. And also, thank you for Human Rights Working Group and Sasaka Peace Foundation and Forum Asia for hosting the event today. And I'm very, very excited to be able to share some of our key findings and outcome of our joint research that we have collectively worked during the last 6 months. And I'm very grateful to Annie for kindly describing some of our key points of the book and endorsing our work. I would like to give a first overview of the research before handing over to Lennon and Andika, who will share with us the situation specific to Taiwan and Malaysia as examples. And after that, I will come back and give some analysis and discussion on way forward. Although our research really started to respond to emerging issues around COVID-19, I also like to give a little bit of background of this initiative. And this is a part of our initiative led by Human Rights Working Group and Sasaka Peace Foundation during the last couple of years, which was already mentioned, that to build stronger network among civil society and work collaboratively to address the issues faced by increasing number of migrant workers who are moving between East and Southeast Asian countries. And following up a scoping survey in April this year, which was conducted by Human Rights Working Group on Indonesian migrant workers abroad during the COVID pandemic, it was decided that to conduct this cross-regional joint research. So this cross-regional joint research on COVID-19 and migrant worker situations, we have a threefold objectives. So the first of all is to assess the impact of COVID-19 response measures and also the pre-existing migrant policies on rights of migrant workers during the pandemic. And also to explore how vulnerabilities of migrant workers translate into their lived experiences and how state and non-state actors are dealing with challenges faced by migrant workers. And we would like to amplify voices of those who are affected and bring these voices to the multi-stakeholders at national and regional or even international level. So we have covered 7 migrant workers' major destinations in East and Southeast Asia, which are Hong Kong, Japan, Malaysia, Singapore, South Korea, Taiwan, and Thailand. And some features of our study that I would like to introduce. So we have collaborated with 8 field researchers in 7 destinations and who are working directly with migrant workers. So they are either NGO practitioners or the researchers, but who are based on community-based research. And also in the timeline of our research, we have started overall planning in May, but we've started the desk research in June. And between July and August, or in some cases up until September, we've conducted field research with support and dedication of our field researchers. And we've spent from October until November on analysis and report writing. And we just finished our last couple of weeks. It's been final touch of our report. And our study is a qualitative study, so we tried to fill the gaps in the public discourses around pandemic, which overemphasizes statistics, and we wanted to bring the lived experiences of migrant workers as one of the most affected groups. And it also focuses on understanding issues that are significant in each destination. Instead of doing the comparative studies, we appreciate the different contexts in different destinations. And we are able to also include information and data from local sources, which are available other than English language, benefiting from our field researcher based in these destinations. We are able to include some raw data, which we call it stories of migrant workers, despite all the limitations that has been imposed during the pandemic. We were able to hear directly some of the stories from migrant workers. And this is our team. I'll just skip that. You can have this list in our book. And also I want to identify here that our limitation of the studies. So we have looked at some of the selected aspects of measures taken in each destination. So we acknowledge the needs. There are needs for deeper intersectional analysis, cross-gender, sexual orientation, age, disability, race, and ethnicity within migrant workers communities in the future. And we also have not been able to cover much of the role of other stakeholders, such as embassies, international donors and organizations. And we are today joined by Ambassador Umar Hadi. So I would like to learn from his experiences, the role of stakeholders such as embassies. And we also acknowledge the importance to understand the situation in countries of origin, which we have not been able to cover this time. And as pandemic continues, we need to monitor the ongoing situations and also assess the long-term impact of COVID-19 and the rights of migrant workers. So I will just quickly go through the common challenges faced by migrant workers in these nations that we have found. So they can be due to travel on movement restrictions that imposed during the pandemic. So there has been, of course, immobility has been a very big issue locally and internationally, and it has limited migrant workers' access to essential support and information as well. There has been limited or no access to healthcare and PPE to protect themselves, and migrant workers has been directly affected by reduction of businesses, including job losses and unfair treatment and workplaces because of due to lack of protections that are provided to migrant workers. And because of that, there has been a lot of financial difficulties and at the same time inability to access or ineligibility to access the financial assistance that is provided to the government, by the government to the locals and nationals. and limited or no access to information has impacted all aspects of migrant workers' rights. And overall, so migrant workers' rights to health, because this is a public health crisis, the rights to health has been violated through limited or no access to healthcare, goods, other essential services, informations, as well as safe living and working conditions, and labor rights violations, including unfair treatment around wages and termination, exploitations and abuses, and also, as mentioned by Annie, the risk of human trafficking has been increased. And for those who live with employers or live in dormitories, the termination of their employment meant that they also lost a place to live. And there has been fear of immigration law enforcement, which has become barriers to many migrant workers, particularly those who are undocumented or with irregular status, in accessing essential care and support. And migrant workers who are stranded face the risk of losing their legal status after their visas expires. And when they are given extension of visa, they're only short-term or case-by-case extensions. And these extensions do not properly protect the rights of migrant workers. And due to the sense of uncertainties that coming from these situations, the mental health conditions of migrant workers has been deteriorated as well. It's been a challenge. Yeah, so from here, I would like to pass on to to our field researchers to give us some examples of in each specific countries, which is Taiwan and Malaysia this time. So over to you, Lennon, first, I think. Yeah, back to you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. So my name is Lennon Wang. I'm working in Serve the People Association. It's a labor organization for local and migrant workers. We have shelters. So we do the services to the migrants. So I don't have slides. I just report to you orally. So the general situation of the migrant workers in Taiwan. Now there are over around 700,000 migrant workers from 4 nationalities: Indonesia, Vietnam, the Philippines, and Thailand. And they work in different categories. Mostly, the biggest one is factory, or we can say industrial workers. And the second largest is the domestic workers. It includes mostly caretakers, domestic caretakers. And a small group, it's only less than 2,000. They are domestic helpers. So this is what's very unique in Taiwan. Most of the domestic workers are caretakers. So there's a ward, there's a you can say patient, or usually an elder to be taken care of. And there's a very small number of domestic helpers. And then there are fishermen in local fishing and also distant water fishing. So generally, the number of the confirmed cases of COVID-19 until yesterday was 749, and with 7 deaths, which sounds, the 700 plus is total. It's the total confirmed cases from the beginning. So comparing to many parts in the world, it's you can say that the control of this disease is okay. It didn't spread so much. There is no community spread until now. Not so, at least maybe not big. And we don't have lockdown. We don't have lockdown like in the US or in China or in the in Europe. And so mostly the people are doing their lives as usual. And so the protection measure in Taiwan has been praised by many media in many countries. But so our question is it really so good? Is it really true that it's so good and the migrants, they have the same equal rights with others? Our answer is no, actually no. So I would take a few. There are many things in the research. I hope you can have a chance to read it. I would just take some items as example. Actually, even before the pandemic, the rights of the migrant workers are seriously violated. There are some common problems among the migrant workers in Taiwan. The biggest one, the placement fee. All of them, or almost all of them, they have to pay a big amount of placement fee that they don't have cash, so they will be demanded to have a loan before they came to Taiwan. So there is a debt bondage, and it's supported by the legal system because they were demanded to sign a promissory note, which says if they fail to pay on time monthly, the lender can sue them in a court. So it's a long debt bondage supported by the judicial system and legal system, and confiscation of all the personal IDs and personal documents, and lack of labor inspection in the household and fishing vessels, and physical violence, especially in the domestic works and the fishing, and sexual harassment and rape. This is very, very common for domestic workers. Illegal works. Actually, many workers are demanded to do many illegal works. And the domestic workers and also the fishermen in the distant water fishing vessels, they are still excluded from the Labor Standard Act, which means they are not under the labor laws. They are not protected by the regulation on the minimum wage and also the working hours and even the mandatory day off. And that's the reason why most of the domestic workers in Taiwan, they don't even have a regular day off weekly. And there are many illegal deductions from the employer or from the broker. And discrimination on the pregnancy is rampant. Even we have laws to protect women when they are pregnant, but most of the migrants, if they are pregnant, they will be forced to choose either if they want to keep the baby. You want to keep the baby, usually they have to choose to resign and go home. If they want the job, they have to have an adoption privately. So this is the situation before COVID-19. So what about after that? So the first one is the mask distribution or the selling system. This system has been praised by many countries, but actually we have to use the valid health card and national health insurance card. Use this card to buy in the convenience store or the pharmacy. But the problem is many migrant workers, they don't really have this card. Maybe it's taken by the employer. Maybe they cannot even go out. Maybe there are some gaps between different employments. And not to mention the undocumented migrants. They don't have the card at all. They don't have any valid documents. And also the fishermen on the distant water fishing vessels, they don't have the health insurance at all. So if they land in Taiwan in the land, they cannot. Okay, so that's the mask distribution system. The government have been trying to make it better, to give it to undocumented workers, but actually it doesn't really work too much. We are really lucky that there is no big outbreak among the migrants because their situation, their dorms or the fishing vessels are not better than those in Singapore, as you can see from the news, where they had big outbreak. And second, I want to mention is about the discrimination on the undocumented worker. Earlier this year, in late February, the number 32 confirmed case was an Indonesian undocumented caretaker. She got the disease very probably by a patient she took care for some time. And then she left the house, she left the family, and then before she was found again, there was public fear that maybe this worker will spread this disease everywhere. So some officials, they have very negative and hostile statements against the undocumented migrant workers, including the most terrible is Mr. Huang, the mayor of Tainan. He demanded to crack down on undocumented migrants. And yeah, so that's very terrible. So on that time, many NGOs, including us, SPA, and also many scholars, we had different statements. We demanded that the government should have a general amnesty for the undocumented migrant workers so they can come out for medication, at least to check up. And that's safer for everyone, actually, because the more you want to catch them, the more you want to crack down to arrest them, the more they will hide. So what if some of them really have the disease, have the virus? It's a danger, it's a risk for everyone. But sadly, the government never listened to that, never take this suggestion. And then I want to say about the bonus, incentives. Like many other countries, we have some kinds of compensation, but the migrants can get are very limited. Okay, most of the incentives they cannot get at all. And then the visa extension. Taiwan is very friendly to foreigners, for the professionals and also for the tourists. For the tourists who don't have a permanent reason to stay in Taiwan, so the government of Taiwan extended. Actually, they announced the automatic extension for the tourists for several times. So it sounds like it never ends, because they know the home country of most of the tourists in Taiwan, most of their home countries are, they have more cases in Taiwan, so it's safer here. So, okay, so I want to, almost closing, I want to have one more case. So this is FOC, some ships of distant water fishing vessels. There are some vessels, they are owned by Taiwanese, but they use a foreign flag. It's called a flag of convenience. So some of the ships, they have been stranded in Taiwan for months. Some of them, the workers, they have been stranded for maybe 5 or 6 months. They have been stranded there because they didn't have any legal entry to Taiwan. So for those who want to go home, the broker took them to surrender, to have a fake report to the government that they ran away, and then they can go out, they can go home. But 2 of them were sent to the airport through this channel, but then they were arrested by the National Immigration Bureau for illegal entry, because there was no stamp on their passport for the legal entry to Taiwan. So they have been detained in the airport for 20 days before we help to take them out through a legal case. So this is one of the most ridiculous things. Actually, they are not the only ones. We know there are many. There are more than 100 that have been stranded in a port in Taiwan. So there are many cases like this. So I just conclude for a few phrases. In Taiwan, this is not that serious, but the problems of the migrant workers, some of them have been worsened during the pandemic. But together with the migrants, we want to reveal, and the good thing is that the civil society in Taiwan, together with the migrant organization themselves, we could face these problems and address them and pressure the government to have some changes. And sometimes we can do it. So thank you very much. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Shannon, for your very, very comprehensive summary of what have happened in Taiwan over the course of the year with regards to migrant workers and COVID-19. I forgot to introduce Lennon beforehand. So Lennon is the director of the Service Center and Shelter for Migrant Workers and Serve the People Association for Association Taoyuan. And next we'll have Andika Wahab from the Institute of Malaysian and International Studies from the National University of Malaysia, who would be summarizing the Malaysia chapter of our book. So Andika, the space is yours.
Thank you, Adeline. Do you hear me? Well, okay, thank you. Salam and very good afternoon, everyone. And of course, first of all, I would like to thank you, Daniel and Mariko and Adeline, yourself, for being very hardworking for the past 6 months, assisting us not only during the research period, but I guess you have organized some workshop for us to present the findings and shape it. And of course, also thank you to our, also congratulations as well to our country researchers, the other countries, doing together this piece of publication together with us. Of course, Pak Effendi, and of course our appreciation to Sasakawa Peace Foundation for your generosity supporting this research initiative, and of course importantly the people that being the background of this paper, especially in Malaysian chapter, the migrant workers themselves. Just to put on record my appreciation to all of them. I have actually invited them to be part of this workshop, this forum, but I guess they are all working. I mean, this is work week days, so I mean, they won't be able to join us, but I guess their contribution have been very well and will be reflected in the report. So let me just start with the problem statement. I guess there's not much different between Malaysia and other countries, I guess, as destination countries to the migrant workers. Just to give you a bit background, in Malaysia in particular, that we have about 3 and 5 million migrant workers, 3 and 5 million migrant workers. And I guess about 2 million are undocumented, meaning they're having passport and working pass. And I guess about between 2 and 3, perhaps, estimate number of migrant workers without having the passport or working pass. So cumulatively about 5 million migrant workers, both documented and undocumented. And technically all the workers, if they are regular workers, migrant workers, they are actually hired at least in 6 sectors in Malaysia, namely the manufacturing, plantation, construction, and domestic service, agriculture, and various services or service sector, like restaurant and all that. I think for the past few decades in Malaysia, migrant workers have been seen as, a temporary measure for the government of Malaysia just to fill up the labor requirement in these particular 6 sectors. So meaning to say that they are just temporary here. There is no clear pathway in terms of the career. So we have put, I think, about 10 years, the limit, then they have to go back. But in reality, there are workers finish their first 10 years, they go back to their country of origin, and then they continue coming to Malaysia if they see a value to continue their employment in Malaysia. And as you know, prior to COVID-19, I guess you probably already aware that migrant workers are already in vulnerable situation in Malaysia. I mean, you have been hearing that workers in Malaysia, especially migrant workers working in the low-paid sector, they are considered as unskilled, and they're doing all the 3D job, meaning dirty, demeaning and dangerous job. For most part of the work, for example, in plantation sector, they are the one will do the most labor intensive work. So for example, in plantation, they are the one will do the toughest job, for example, harvesting or loading of fruit. So these are the toughest job that I think a local shy away. I mean, we don't really work in that sector. And at the same time, I guess you are also, aware of the situation of migrant workers in Malaysia. So issues like, retention of passport, the moment they entered Malaysia and in the airport, the employers already taken away their passport and having some consent from the workers, but there's issue with the validity of the consent and becoming a norm in Malaysia. So basically retention of passport is becoming like assurance for employers to make sure whenever they have investment in recruiting migrant workers, they're not gonna in the loose side of it. So I think that's the perspective from the employers. And issues like unpaid wages or workers not being paid of their wages more than 3 months, that also indicate to incident of forced labor is somehow, you can hear it everywhere. And lack of freedom of movement, and workers are placed in a situation of debt bondage because they have to cover the recruitment cost that is very excessive. It's also shared by our country researcher from Taiwan, I guess the same situation in Malaysia. And they're all living in overcrowded, lack of access to sanitary, and some manipulation during the regularization program. In Malaysia, we have legalization program, regularization program, where we actually try to legalize the workers without passport. And so that actually brings me to the key question of this research, especially for Malaysian chapter, is that in light of COVID-19 outbreak, and the imposition of different phases of Malaysian movement control orders, MCO, how does that affect the lives of migrant workers? That would be the first question that I'm actually using it as the benchmark, right? And then the second question would also designs the problem statement in this research is that how government respond to issues on migrant workers. Is there any different when they're responding to local, for example? And then the third research question is that, are there any good practices employed by the businesses, regardless of their size and sectors, in addressing the need of the workers. So the three research questions actually shaped the research for Malaysian paper. And in terms of the objective, because of the time constraint, I guess the motive was initially to just undertake a rapid assessment and try to reflect the life experience of workers during COVID-19. So in assessing their life experience, I usually being guided by the life experience as an anthropologist. We're looking at least in three different aspects, namely the everyday life of migrant workers, how the COVID affect their everyday life. And secondly, would be their work experience. And the third one would be their social identity. So basically how COVID-19 and the movement control orders that we have in Malaysia, even until now, shape the everyday life, their work experience and social identity in Malaysia. So the findings of it, I mean, not much different with other countries, but I can just summarize a few of the findings that we have found in this research is that on the aspect of everyday life, we have listened from the workers that they are having difficulties to access food and in extreme situation, the workers, that also led to real risk of hunger. So this is not just some story that people are making up. I think this is a real situation where migrant workers having this problem. And of course, there's a limitation, or maybe for irregular migrant workers, they have problem with access to medical assistance because of their status, including COVID-19 tests. So because of their status, they're afraid they're going outside to get the medical assistance or attention from the health agencies. And we have also heard the limitation, and in fact, for some workers having no access at all to humanitarian assistance, but not only NGOs, but I guess also the assistance given by the government or through the government service like welfare department and all that. And there's also a very clear fear of arrest and detention, because I think it was the 1st May of 2020 where the government started the massive raid immigration, and that was also followed by several raids. So that would actually scared a lot of migrant workers. That also counterproductive to a certain extent, because initially government said, no, you migrant workers, regardless of your status, you can actually go outside and get medical tests. But because of this raid, no one actually gonna feel the need and then dare to go outside their working or their living condition or their houses. Yeah. The second part of the life experience is the work experience itself. Also not so much different between before and then during the pandemic itself. There are issues of unpaid wages, workers, especially daily paid workers, because in Malaysia, not all being paid monthly, but some workers are paid on daily paid or even some hours of work, and some other workers depend on the productivity itself. So if they are depending on this, if the work structure is like that, they will lose their income because they can't work every day. Because they can't work every day. And then exclusion from the financial and employment related incentive. So throughout the pandemic, there was several incentive launched by the government, but I guess the entire incentive doesn't really benefit workers, except one thing, maybe on the provision of 25% discount for levy, but it's not directly to migrant workers. This is actually for employers, but to a certain extent, that would enable the employers to at least retain the workers, not completely abandon them. And then increasing in retrenchment among migrant workers. So, I mean, this is quite common happening during the COVID-19. And there were incidents where workers being abandoned, right? So if workers being abandoned, there's no communication between workers and employers. There's greater risk where the workers will not be able to be their working pass, or in fact their passport being renewed. So because in Malaysia they need to be renewed every year, especially the working pass. So without communication and they're being abandoned, so there's a risk of these workers being irregular workers in the future. Yeah, so it's just about months we have to wait these workers. And then workers work under stress. This is also, you probably have heard the workers working in the glove industry. They're working under very, very excessive hours of work, more than 12 hours, because of the production expectation is high. And they're also living in poor working and living condition and lack of SOP. So I think the third aspect of the life experience that I'm actually looking at was the limitation in social interaction. Yeah, social gathering is a key element among migrant population in Malaysia. So because of the movement control order, they won't be able to do their social interaction. That would actually limit their interaction, communication, not only among themselves, yeah, even with the local population. And there was also issue because of the, there was also issue related to health, to access to health information. And that would also influence the attitude of the migrant workers towards prevention and sanitation because of the lack of awareness and lack of health information. Yeah? And then there's issue with the inability of the workers to communicate with family back home because of the access to mobile internet and credit and all that. That cumulatively actually contribute to the effects of the emotion and feelings of distance among the workers and then stress level going up among the migrant workers. And the other aspect of my research was also looking at the good practices, yeah, good practices among employers. I have to put the caveat here that I didn't have the chance to interview employers, but I'm using the workers as the proxy sources of information where we try to get what practices done by the employers during the pandemic. So there were some good practices done by the companies, especially large companies. Yeah. So there were, I mean, after the government launched the SOP, I mean, the first week or second week of March, some businesses have taken immediate response to that by integrating the government SOP into their business. Right. So this is quite a good effort by the business itself to integrate the SOP, because sometimes SOP launched by the government, released by the government, not necessarily friendly to business. So business need to make tailor-made of it. Yeah. So I think businesses have done that. And then they also created, some businesses, they actually created their own response team within the company, especially with big number of workers. They design SOP in business. Some companies also covered the test, COVID-19 test, meaning to say that they actually covered the cost of COVID-19 testing during the period where the government even didn't have the policy direction whether workers should cover or whether compensation scheme should cover. So there wasn't any clear direction by the government, but companies have already taken action, said, let us cover that. So I think that is a good indication from the business. And they provide counseling to workers. Some employers also facilitate communication with families, between workers and the families, because they know that the workers cannot go outside and get the communication going on. So they provided like internet free for the workers to stay connected with the family. Let me just go to I'm not sure whether I have time, but maybe just to wrap up this, just to try to do the reflection, right? Because I think after all, we need to look at how the COVID-19 actually affect life. So I'm bringing back the 3 research questions that I posed earlier, how this affect the lives of migrant workers. And I note that the sample is very small number of sample, but I don't make generalization here, but I think the case studies that we have found actually given some indication how the situation looks like. Yeah. So how this affect the lives of migrant workers? The first research question is that we already know that the workers having this vulnerability even before the COVID-19 outbreak. But because of the COVID-19 outbreak and their vulnerability, their lack of awareness on containment effort, or maybe on prevention of health, and lack of access to information, and they're living in overcrowded, that actually increase the risk of infection. We have already notified, we have the conversation before during the first wave, but now we are already entering the third wave, where the number of positive COVID-19 cases majority is actually among the migrant workers. We have already said that in the beginning that this will scale up if we don't take the necessary action. I think the first thing that we need to acknowledge is that migrant workers' health is also a public health. Failing to address migrant workers' health would have serious implication to public health as a whole. Yeah. So I think that the key message that we are getting from the first research question. I think the second research question, how government respond to issues concerning migrant workers. Now we have seen that different government agencies are actually involved. We have Ministry of Home Affairs, we have Ministry of Health, we have Ministry of Human Resources involved, we have National Security Council involved. So there was really a problem in terms of coordination and who is actually supposed to make a call when it comes to migrant workers. So there was a confusion, there was a lack of coordination, there was inconsistency in making decision when it comes to migrant workers. So that because of that, there was a bit of delay in terms of delivering key message in handling the pandemic during that period. And there was also a point from my perspective is that there is no clear leadership and ownership of that issue, because we definitely need someone that to lead and champion that. But I guess because of the cross-cutting nature of this issue, so we won't be able to see one particular dominant agency that lead the efforts. And also we have to acknowledge the challenge to balance between health prioritization, security at the same time, and also try to address demand from industry, because industry needs to continue and they need workers. I think these three triangulation of issues need to be carefully designed in the future, or taken care of in the future. So in relation to good business practices, as I said earlier, what I see is only the large companies, right? The big companies, excluding the glove industry. I mean, the other big companies like plantation sector and construction and all that. But we have to bear in mind, large companies, less than 9% in Malaysia. The whole lot of the industry players, about 2 million registered companies as SMEs, right? So I think the question is that how best these good practices by the big companies can be scaled up at the national level, can be cross-cutting, cross-sectoral, and where policy intervention is needed to support, so that SMEs could also play their part, play their role collaboratively in addressing the need of the workers. Hopefully within the time.
Thank you very much, Andika. I'm just going to pass the floor to Mariko again to just do a summary of our suggestions from the research.
Yeah, thank you so much, Andika and Lennon, for sharing your findings. It's very, very good summary. And so, yeah, just I want to wrap up our findings, including these 2 countries that was spoken about, and also the other 5 countries that we have looked at. So as a conclusion, so we identify the vulnerabilities of migrant workers and structural issues around that. So as it has been explained very, very well already, so the most challenges faced by migrant workers are rooted in the ways that they have been treated and positions in the society since long time before COVID happened. So they were treated as workers just to serve based on national interest, which is often centered around economic development and national security. And this pandemic has made their vulnerabilities exacerbated. And because most migrant workers are given temporary status with very limited rights, and also their visas are attached to their employers or specific work, and it limits their job mobilities. And this kind of treatment has continued during the pandemic, and so yeah, the situation has been continued. And the migrant workers in some sectors, as explained by Lennon, as an example of fishermen, for example, so domestic workers in many countries too, but they are not protected by national labor law, so leaving them very, very vulnerable to exploitations, including unsafe living and working conditions, and which again worsened during the pandemic. And another thing is that the government has used nationality, citizenship, and migration status as criteria for essential services and support during the pandemic. So there has been exclusions and inclusions based on the legal status, and which reproducing the border controls within the border during the pandemic again. And also it did not address the issue that some migrant workers do not have access to their own personal documents, which even though they might be eligible for some support, they will not be able to access them. And again, also there has been issues around immigration law enforcement during the course of this, the criteria for the services. And there has been a stigmatization, discriminations, which led to underrepresentation and lack of participations of migrant workers. And temporarily low-wage or undocumented migrant workers have very restricted or no access to participate fully in the society to deal with these situations. And also we have identified a lot of resilience that need to be acknowledged and supported. One of the key things is that essential support for vulnerable and underrepresented migrant communities has long time relied on the civil society and local initiatives. So during the pandemic, when the government or international organizations try to intervene in the wake of crisis, it's not as much effective because there has not been trust buildings that the civil society has played. And as a result, they're not being able to protect the society as a whole during this public health crisis. And local NGOs and self-help groups play significant roles in humanitarian assistance and disseminating information particularly, and providing cultural sensitive support and signposting them. And this was because of the already built trusted relationship with migrant communities. These civil societies work effective and able to respond to the emerging needs of the communities that they work with. And also civil society has shown not only the direct support, but also through advocacy work, they have been playing a very important role to eliminate or change the discriminatory measures and policies which are in place. We have seen some good examples of that. And as mentioned by Andika, in the case of Malaysia, there has been some businesses has been facilitating the migrant workers access to essential support and services as well. Their community organizations, including places of worship, has facilitated migrant workers access to some support and also themselves providing essential care and support to the migrant workers. So we have seen these migrant workers, communities, and their supporters' resilience, which must be supported alongside with the government efforts dealing with this pandemic. And as a collective initiative, we come up with, as a joint research, proposed a guideline for protecting rights of migrant workers during the public health crisis. So we have developed this based on our findings of our joint research, but also we try to keep it broad enough so that it can be adapted and used for advocacy work at various levels in every destinations. So it begins with general principle, which states recognition of specific vulnerabilities of migrant workers and acknowledgement of the community resilience and importance of meaningful participations. We call for this no discriminatory criteria for essential services, as well as needs for clear separation between immigration law enforcement and public health service provisions. And it covers 7 specific areas of rights that you can see here that I've listed. And finally, the role of civil society and international and cross-regional cooperation, which we call for support for the resilience of civil society and migrant workers communities, and also to continue cooperation among countries or regions of origin and destinations to continue. And finally, this is really for us as this research is an advocacy research. So for us, in order for us to advocate for meaningful participation and how we bring this research as a tool of advocacy and ways forward for us, in order to advocate for this meaningful participation and representation of migrant workers, we need to recognize of these 3 points that I want to highlight, which are the national interests that influencing and also embodied within migration policies in both countries of origin destinations, and also historical context and current political system, including dynamic of leadership in the cross-sector issues that Andika specifically mentions, that in this case, it's migration and public health, and the level of democracy and capacity and space that's available for civil society to advocate migrant workers, and these their impact on decision-making process. And as cross-regional perspectives, we need to recognize the some strengths and weaknesses. For example, like in Southeast Asia, there is a strong regionalism. Within the framework of ASEAN, they were able to come up with some political commitment, although there has been still challenges remain in terms of political will of the implementation. While within East Asian countries, they have responded to this pandemic not as a region. It's a very, very individual responses, but again, they've seem to have shown some richer experiences in dealing with public health crisis and available resources are there. And there has been cross-regional cooperation that can be strengthened as a framework. There is an ASEAN Plus 3 that we might be able to use. There's a new initiative, ASEAN Regional Center on Public Health and Emergencies and Emerging Diseases, which have a quite strong involvement of East Asian countries as well, especially the Japanese government has involved in this a lot. And there is also an international framework, which is Global Compact on Migration as an example. We need to maximize these frameworks to advocate, and also we need to call more participation of civil society organizations within the discussion. And this is really to remind ourselves that, you know, ensuring meaningful participation and representation within our work. So as Annie really nicely pointed out, that the migrant workers themselves, you know, they're not just service receiver. We must work with them in terms of our civil society advocacy work. So this is from me, and yeah, thank you so much, and happy International Migrants Day, everyone.
Thank you, Mariko, for summarizing all the research that's been conducted in the past half a year or so. I will pass the Zoom to Para Fendi for the commentaries and open discussion section. But before that, I want to encourage the participant to voice the questions that you wish our speakers to address, either through the Q&A button that is at the bottom of your Zoom, and our speakers could address it also throughout the next section, but also they will have a discussion section in the following section that will be facilitated by Pak Effendi. So Pak Effendi, the place is yours.
Sorry, I just I forgot to mention that this book is now going to be launched, so you can find the link to be popped up on your chat, so it's where you can access.
Okay. Thanks, Mariko.
Okay, very good afternoon to all distinguished speakers, distinguished commentators. I'd like to recognize His Excellency Pak Umar Hadi. Thank you for your time to attend our public discussion. And I'd like to start by congratulations to all researchers and the coordinators, and of course, happy International Migrant Days. This is the reason we have this publication, as well as regional international discussion on the matters which was coming, pre-existing issues and the issues coming after the pandemic. We have heard the response from, the presentation from the researchers, coordinators, Mariko, and then presented by two researchers, one from Malaysia representing the Southeast Asia cities, because there are seven destination countries. Yeah, so the pictures from the Southeast Asian countries reflected by the presentation of Dr. Andika, and the pictures from the East Asian countries, destination countries, was presented by our colleague Lennon. And now it's time to hear the comments as well as response from two distinguished speakers. May I introduce first Ibu, it's not Ibu, it's it's Shamini Darsni Kalimutu. So she is the current executive director of Forum Asia, a regional human rights organization with membership, more than 40 memberships probably. I'm not updated anymore now with the membership. The members are coming from actually all Asia continent, South Asia, even Central Asia, the new members, Southeast Asia, and East Asia. So your comments will be very useful because you have a very wide view of on the issue of migrant workers, not only in East Asia, in Southeast Asia, but also in other part of Asia, which is South Asia and Central Asia. I believe they have the same challenges as it was presented by the researchers. So we will hear the response from Shamini Darshini Kalimutu, and then the next commentator and facilitators, our special guest, now Ambassador Umar Hadi. He is, of course, coming from the government perspective, but I think we are very lucky to have him with us today because he has a very wide experience engaging with civil society in his 26 years career as a diplomat. Ambassador posts in several countries, in European countries, as well as now in South Korea, with a special experience in the context of pandemic, when he, as a leadership of the Indonesian government in South Korea, respond to protect the Indonesian not only Indonesian diaspora, but also all Indonesian diaspora in South Korea. 80% are migrant workers, including the seamen, who are the most difficult and most vulnerable situation, as it was described. Very lucky to have these two commentators. I'm sorry for this kind of long introduction, but I think it's important for our discussion this afternoon. Darshini, Shamini Darshini, over to you, please.
Thank you, Pak Effendi. I'm gonna share my screen with you. Hopefully this works well.
Yes, it works well.
Okay, brilliant. Do you see a full screen?
Not yet.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, let me try this. Okay, this should
Yes.
work. Okay, brilliant. Thank you everyone for your attention. I don't have very many slides to share, but on the outset rather, let me just say a huge congratulations to the researchers and to HRWG for this amazing report that you have put forward and on such an emblematic day tomorrow. I do have a couple of things that, just to rehash what we heard, also from the previous speakers, as well as what is already captured in the report. And then I could lend maybe some perspectives on what I was asked to share, which is on what civil society organizations could do. We know already from the previous speakers that, COVID-19 challenges faced by migrant workers, especially from the speakers from Taiwan, from Lennon and from Andika, we heard how many similarities there are between the two countries in terms of how COVID-19 and the measures implemented by these governments have had an impact on migrant workers. But Effendi mentioned just now that there could be similarities in other parts of Asia, and yes, we have seen that in some of our work and through our member organizations, of which, Pak Effendi, there are now 83 across 23 countries. So what we're seeing in terms of the impact is the repressive and discriminatory policies that were against migrant workers and in place before COVID-19 were exacerbated after. This is also, of course, echoed in the report as well. We have seen, narratives blaming migrant workers for bringing COVID-19 into the country, thus othering or scapegoating migrant workers for causing or exacerbating the pandemic. One of the key findings also of the report and of research in other places, including ours at Forum Asia, is that migrant workers have limited or no access to healthcare. These are some of the the key issues that we have been seeing. How can civil society work together? So these are some of the points that I just like to put forward to you on firstly, civil society can work together by coming together to push against the narratives of racism and xenophobia. We have seen in the othering of the migrant workers, as I mentioned just now, we have seen how online spaces have been used to attack migrant workers as among other vulnerable groups, other minorities, in xenophobic manner of causing COVID-19. And this is something that we really need to push against. One of the things that we have to also remember is that advocating for civil society can come together to advocate for enforcement policies and practices, and including forced return and immigration detention that are in accordance with human rights obligations and accompanied by effective public health strategies. This is something that we feel Forum Asia feels very strongly about, because many states, including some of the states in this research piece, have been employing enforcement or punitive measures, or have been trying to manage the pandemic through from a security perspective, which is not very often coupled with public health strategies. So this is something that civil society can continue to push for. We also see that from the report, there's recommendations for, there's a comment on how the level of democratization capacity and space enabling civil society to advocate for migrant workers and their impact on government decision-making has also been noted, and is something that we need to continuously push for. And how? What do we need? Firstly, we need meaningful participation and engagement between civil society organizations and migrant workers. We heard from the earlier speakers about the intersectionality of issues. What happens when you have a migrant worker who is from a vulnerable community and who also lives with a disability and is of a minority race? So these some of this intersectional issues, I feel, have not really been fully explored. And this is something that civil society can start and continue a dialogue on. Second, we also need to learn from lessons across that's coming to us across the borders. And this report is a wonderful way to learn where the commonalities and the differences are in the challenge that migrant workers are facing under the COVID-19 blanket. Third point here is emphasizing the mental health perspective. This is also something that was captured in the report, which I think has not really been fully fleshed out when we talk about the challenges that migrant workers are facing under COVID-19. We have seen, in South Asia, for example, horrible and disastrous effects on the migrant community when lockdown measures were implemented in some South Asian countries. And, so the mental health perspective needs to be taken into consideration and fleshed out more by civil society as we explore resolutions to this issue. My next point is on national human rights institutions and how they play a crucial role in monitoring, documenting, exposing, and investigating how COVID-19 has impacted migrant workers in these and other countries. Civil NHRIs need to play a more active role when it comes to looking at the situation of migrant workers in the COVID-19 pandemic at present. What Forum Asia has done is we have actually, and perhaps this is a little plug if you will indulge me, next week, if all goes well, we are putting out a report on NHRIs and how they have performed in responding to measures implemented by different Asian countries in the COVID-19 situation. And one of the items or points that we highlight in there is how NHRIs have not really been paying attention to the migrant worker community and the impact of COVID-19 on them. So this is something that we need the NHRIs to be more proactive on. In conclusion, really, my conclusion is just one, that we need a human rights-based approach to combat the pandemic and to guide post-pandemic recovery. Security measures will only go so far, but if they are not coupled with impactful and research-led public health measures, we might we will not be able to find a resolution to the for vulnerable groups, including the migrant worker community. I will end there, Pak Effendi, and hand it back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Shamini, for I think you're really pointing out what next to be done from the perspective of civil society. And I really would like to underline what you said about the role of NHRI, National Human Rights Institutions. In most of these countries and of the destination, we have the National Human Rights Institution in Malaysia, Thailand, yeah, and then in East Asia we have Korea. I'm not sure. Yes, Taiwan has one, and then yes, and Japanese doesn't have a national institution. But I agree with you, and I think it is very interesting to look at the role of NHRI. What we heard from a presentation from the book is actually the research on South Korea. They did explain what the NHRI has also done in the context of protecting the most vulnerable group in this context is the migrant workers. And I like to underline as well what you said about the mental health issues, and the intersect as a priority in the context of the migrant workers who are in the situation who are in the depressive situation. That's something that needs to be done as well, responded by not only by civil society, but also by governments. And now, talking about governments, we have Ambassador Umar Hadi with us. And of course, you are dealing with situation in South Korea directly and negotiating with the host countries in trying to protect the migrant workers. Let us hear now your perspective and what would you suggest the follow-up of this research, with some recommendation, whether this recommendation you find it, oh, this is too much, it's impossible, but you said yes, that one is possible. So please, we would like to be enlightened by your perspective. Over to you, Ambassador Umar Hadi.
Thank you, Pak Effendi. Thank you for inviting me. It is an honor and a pleasure. Actually, I have been very eager to join this discussion since the beginning, but due to time constraints, I just joined in 10-15 minutes ago. But I have received the book in digital version, and I have managed to browse the book. And of course, I paid special attention to the South Korea chapter, for obvious reasons. But first, congratulations for the publication of the book. I am very happy for the project team, the researchers. I cannot imagine how difficult it had been to conduct such a wide research and work, and in this time of the pandemic. my first impression when browsing the book is actually a sense of relief. I told myself, Alhamdulillah, thank God, because for there exist dedicated people and civil society groups who, again, despite everything happening during this global pandemic, but you remain consistent in your service to the vulnerable, the migrant workers. And I am actually very much in agreement with the rationale and objectives of the study, the book, especially on one keyword, that is transformation. Because I believe transformation is the biggest story of humanity today. I tend to think that the current pandemic is just some kind of a practice test for us, for humanity. It's just a practice test. And whether or not we can harness our technology, solidarity, and cooperation at the global level will determine the future of humankind. And this requires great transformation. And this is very important, it must be inclusive. So you see, we have similar outlook. But imagine when the real test comes, and most probably this real test will be ecological disasters and other climate change issues. Imagine what will happen to the most vulnerable among us. That is why this study, this book, is very important and very timely. I believe it is an eye-opener, and it has the potential to transform the minds of people like me, the bureaucrats, government officials, who, from time to time overlook the vulnerable part of our society in our policy-making process. Maybe not too many bureaucrats will admit that, but I do. But then this is a universal problem. Bureaucrats overlooking the vulnerables. It is not a country specific, nor it is a time specific. So again, great transformation. Everybody must transform their way of thinking, their way of behavior, their way of living. However, at this opportunity, allow me to address one idea that I think would be very interesting and very important to explore further in this study. This is not actually a new idea, rather it is a basic old knowledge for community activists. And this is about empowerment of migrant workers, community leaders. So the idea is how to bring out, how to empower communities from within the migrant workers community. So instead of implanting something, we can bring out the potentials from their own community. Obviously, I can only talk about Indonesian workers in South Korea as a case study. So the Indonesian community in South Korea is about 40,000 strong. As Pak Effendi said, 80% of them are migrant workers. And they loosely organize themselves into different associations and affiliations. So this community, 40,000, is not a monolithic community. And the most important ones are the religion-based affiliations. Imagine in South Korea, now we have more than 60 Indonesian mosques all over Korea, all built or purchased and managed by this migrant workers community. And then we have more than 20 Indonesian churches in, I think, about 15 or 16 cities in Korea. And then there are also about 25 associations or loose associations based on hometown of origins. So those who are from, let's say, Tegal would have an organization, Paguyuban Tegal or Tegal Organ. So this is the kind of association. And then there are groups, of course, affiliated with civil society organizations in Indonesia. Such, for example, Muhammadiyah has a special chapter in South Korea. Nahdlatul Ulama has a special chapter in South Korea. And these are all managed by the migrant workers community themselves. Then, of course, there are few labor unions, quite loose, but these labor unions are affiliated with the unions in Indonesia, and they are quite active, small in number, but very strong in voice and action. And then last but not least, of course, arts and culture, sports, hobby. One of these groups that I like very much is a group of photography enthusiasts. They call themselves the Odengan. You can follow their activities in their Facebook page. So these organizations or these associations, they may be loosely organized, but the fact remains you can always find a leader or leaders in each and every community. By nature, these leaders already place the interests of the community before his or her own, because otherwise they will have no trust from the community. Also, these leaders are already conversant in articulating the interests of the community. And most of them are even already accustomed to dealing with authorities on behalf of the community for individual or collective matters. These leaders, formal or informal, play a crucial role in bridging the gaps in access to information, access to services, even access to justice system. Especially during this pandemic, I have so many examples when this crucial role plays out very, very well. But let me just take one example just to illustrate my point. And I read it. It was discussed in the book about temporary shortage of face masks in Korea during the most crucial time of the virus outbreak in the month of March. The city of Daegu and its surrounding area was the epicenter of the outbreak, where about 1,300 Indonesian migrant workers reside. The embassy, as already anticipated in its contingency plan, had already stockpiled the face masks, PPEs, and all kinds of medical supplies, food, and everything since January. Just so happened we were very well prepared. But then the challenge was how to distribute the face mask fairly. Surely we cannot do it by ourselves. The embassy cannot do it. We don't have enough people. We don't have enough. So what we did was that we established an outpost in Daegu, so that this post can engage the local community leaders in close proximity. And therefore, the information exchange and distribution of face masks and other supplies could be done in a very efficient and fair manner. But interestingly enough, these Indonesian migrant workers community leaders in Daegu at the time, they were also very sensitive to the plight or the need of other communities. I remember one day I received a phone call from one of these leaders. He said, "Pak, can I share some of these face masks to my East Timorese friend?" Because in Daegu, there are a small number of East Timorese migrant workers. Apparently, they don't have enough supply. Just so happens we had surplus, so we did. And then also, the communities from other cities in South Korea, outside Daegu, the leaders in other cities, they made an appeal to their members for those who have extra face masks should send the face mask to Daegu city. And it worked. And at the end, the stockpile that the embassy already had with this surplus face masks from other cities could bridge the gap in the weeks where there was a shortage of the face masks. The point is, when the embassy trusts, well, when I said embassy, it also means government. When the embassy trusts community leaders and empowers them with information, access, and supply, community does work. I have experienced and witnessed the crucial role of leaders that plays out in other challenges faced by migrant workers, from dissemination of information, gathering feedback, collecting donation for those in need, mediating conflict within and between communities, representing workers in dispute with employers, up to pressuring host government to change a regulation. So perhaps it is interesting to extrapolate this idea into a bigger picture. How to place and acknowledge the role of leaders from within the migrant workers' communities in the overall transformation of governance, how to empower community leaders in ensuring their community's resilience, and how to engage community leaders in policy-making process in both governments of sending and destination country. With those questions, I conclude my story. I wish everyone good health and good fortune. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Excellency Umar Hadi, Ambassador Umar Hadi. I think you have, thank you for the support of the publication and your recognition as an eye-opener for people who are working from the government sides. And I think you underline as well the importance, your own experience working hand in hand with leaders and civil society organization in South Korea, the community of migrant workers. And you even come up with a proposal. These are the people that need to be supported and to be engaged in destination countries as well as sending countries. Thank you so much for that. One thing that we have missed in our discussion, after we listen from Shamini and Ambassador Umar Hadi, is actually what kind of regional action can be done, at the level of ASEAN, because the three members are members of the ASEAN, the three destination countries, and what can be done as well with East Asia. And I think we all understand that there are cooperation in the context of ASEAN +3 context. +3 in this context is China, Hong Kong, China and South Korea and Japan. Yeah, and mentioning this, there is one question actually from the chat that I read from Isabel Cheng, and she was asking about what can be done at the regional level when the notion of cooperation is proposed, when Taiwan is not a member of ASEAN. And yeah, that's basically the question, and how Taiwan can be included in the regional cooperations. So these are the questions as well that need to be addressed. And there is also one question from the Q&A. I see the question is already answered, by Lennon, and so I like to bring the attention of all participants, attendees, to the question of Pak Dedi. So Dedi Kristanto, which is already answered by Lennon. The question is basically, how big is the impact of influence of various migrant workers organizations in reducing the problems? I think partly it was also answered by the experience of Ambassador Umar Hadi, the importance of migrant workers organization or community organization. The second question is, how much influence is the intervention from state and non-state actor in reducing the chain of precarity and various issues? And I think Lennon already answered it. Instead of reading it, I will just ask Lennon to answer it orally. Please, Lennon, you can give the answer.
Okay, just say reply briefly. The first one is some extent. Okay, so you ask. Okay, this gentleman asked, what is it any how influential the civil society can respond? I think one, but actually, ironically, this was not really organized by any specific civil organizations, but instead it was done or initiated by the netizens on Facebook. It was, okay, just make it a background. the Taipei train station, there was a very big central lobby. You can say lobby or plaza. Every Sunday, there were hundreds or maybe thousands of migrants. They gathered there because it's a very good place for them, very convenient, and it's aircon and clean for them to gather. So some people, they don't like it. They often said that, oh, it's very ugly. Why our place was filled with the migrants. So during the pandemic, of course, we understand there was cautious, against the social gathering, social distance. So there was an announcement that, okay, no gathering during this time. Okay, everybody understand. But later on, the administration, it says that, okay, we will continue the ban forever. So that's when we started to be angry. So some netizens, they just organized a protest. So everybody went there to sitting. I wasn't able to go at that day, because I have another appointment. But anyway, it was quite successful. And I would like to say that this event, this similar event has been happened even before, some years before. And I was one of the initiators to have this kind of action against the government's plan to close it or to ban gathering, because we think that's a very important place. So after that, the government just changed the idea. Okay, so it's a useful or effective thing. And the second is, from my understanding, the question was like asking, is it more and more impossible for the government or the NGOs or anyone to influence the migrant workers' lives? I would say no, not really. We, as an advocate, we see very, very clearly how the government can do and should do to increase the working condition and living condition of the migrant workers, to take away the unfair and unequal regulations on them. So they should, but they didn't do. Why they don't do? It's not because they cannot. It's because they don't want. They don't want to be criticized. They don't want to have the noises from the brokers group, from the employers group, who are influential to their votes or even to their money. Some of them are their donors. They of course, so they are careful about it. For the migrants, they don't have any votes. Of course, migrants cannot be donors, so they don't care. Even there are 700,000 of them. They can do a lot to change their lives, but they don't do. The government. So as NGOs, we try the best to push them to try to do something. And so we are not that powerful as the governments or as the enterprises, but we can do something. As we highlight the problems, we pressure the government. We still have some capacity. And of course, some of us, including our organization, we also try to organize or help to organize the migrants. So if the migrant workers are organized and they have a better organization, they have a bigger voice, they can also help themselves to voice out their needs, to pressure the government, to pressure the employers, to pressure the brokers to do the things they should. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Lennon, for answering that question from Pak Dike, from Dedi Kristanto. Yeah, and I like now we have a look at the time now. Can we have another 10 minutes comments? Because I like from the participants here, I understand. I would like to recognize Ibu Nuke Pujiastuti, the Deputy Director of Indonesian Research Institute. She's also an expert on the migration issue. Whether you could also contribute to our discussion here on the question of, especially now about the book, and then the second one is on how do you think the regional cooperation can be advocated? Looking at the proposals coming from the research. I'd like to ask Ibu Nuke, and I ask Ibu, the organizer as well, to
Yes.
Yeah, Ibu Nuke.
Okay. Maybe can I open my video?
You have a video. Wow. Okay.
Really? Because I can see my face. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You are.
Okay. Thank.
Or your face. Huh? You can only hear your voice, but your voice is very nice already. Please, Ibu Nuka. Yes, we can see you. But that's a flower. Now the flower is gone.
Sorry. Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks a lot for inviting me in this very important discussion. First of all, I would like to congratulate to Awirga and also all of you. The book launching is a very great. Unfortunately, I do not get to read it, but I'm very excited to hear the presentations and also the comment. First of all, I would like to ask to just a comment. Maybe I'm wrong to Lennon. As long as know when I have many discussions about forced migrations, especially uh, trafficking in persons. As long as I know, maybe I'm wrong, that Taiwan is one of the best policy policy implementations and many things, because many time when I talk with the government, sorry, I talk with the government, not with the civil society. At the time, they give a lot of informations and very important, I think, and try also to put the human rights. Even though at that time I also give some point, especially for the people and see the trafficking in person, and see that many Indonesians seller a part of the trafficking in persons. So what's actually from your perspective, for your perception, what's actually, if we talk about the migrant worker, and when we talk about the trafficking in person, how the government cope, it try to manage it well, because I believe some part of the trafficking in persons actually migrant worker. So please give your comment. And my comment is, I think it's a good idea when we talk about the migrations, international migrations, we should put together, even though it's actually forced migrations or migrant worker that regularly. Because if not, sometimes from my study, I know that especially in Indonesia, if we talk about the forced migrations and our government said, oh no, it is not my responsibility. Oh, it is a police responsibility. So I can't imagine when we talk about the human security. So I think so both is a very important. So I think for the regional cooperations, it's a good idea if we try to make it what's synergy each other. That's all. Sorry. Because I don't
Thank
know.
you. Thank you, Ibu Nuka, for your question and your comment. Yes, thank you so much. Yes, I'd like to give directly to Lennon, and then after that we have kind of wrapping up, because time is already 2 minutes after 4 o'clock. Yes, and before I give to Lennon, and there is also after Lennon talk, and then I will invite Mariko as a coordinator of the research to give a response of the discussion, and then we come to a closing session. Lennon, please, your answer.
Yes. Okay. Thanks for your comments and question, Professor Pachastudi. I hope I pronounced correctly. In terms of the regulation in Taiwan, I would say, please. Yeah, I often heard it from Indonesian government officials that some of them, they said, oh, they thank Taiwan to protect their nationals they thank Taiwan to offer such a good environment for the Indonesian migrant workers to work and live. I would beg your attention. No, please don't say that. Please don't say that. It is not that good. It's very far from good, very far from ideal from our point of view. Maybe Taiwan has offered something a little bit better than some countries, not to be offensive, but I know the situation a little bit in Malaysia. I know it's not good. Maybe we have a little bit better than in Malaysia. Maybe we have something a little bit better than the Middle East. But if you compare to South Korea, there are many things that we can learn from. If you compare to the situation in Europe, many European countries, we are too far behind them. And so in terms of human trafficking, honestly, I will say most of the migrant workers in Taiwan are actually victims from human trafficking. Why? Because most of them, they have the debt bondage, as I mentioned earlier, and most of them, they cannot have their valid passport, ARC, and other documents. Many of them, they don't have anything. Some of them, they have this one, but not that one. Okay, and many of them, they have the threats, intimidation, and cheating from the brokers. So they are afraid to take actions. They are afraid to complain. And even the government's grievances system, sometimes it doesn't really work. So I will say most of them, they are victims from human trafficking. And from the question I just answered from the chat, actually, the Indonesian government, I strongly support, I want to say out loud, I strongly support the demand from the Indonesian government for the zero placement fee policy. And I hope all the migrant sending countries can do the same, okay? Don't do it just by one country. It's too easy for migrant receiving countries like Taiwan to isolate you. That's exactly what Taiwan government is trying to do. The government from Taiwan, they said, oh, this is only a one-sided opinion. We didn't have any talk. That's not good. We reject that. And they are trying to find another migrant sending country. From the internal information I heard, it's Myanmar. So Taiwan government is trying to get workers from Myanmar. From our point of view, from my point of view, it's really ridiculous. They don't even think of what services they should do for another nationality of migrant workers. How many Myanmar or Burmese speakers they can have in the governments to give them services? They didn't even think about that. They just want another nationality so they can oppress, they can exploit. So that's ridiculous. So no, Taiwan is far from being ideal. The thing is, but the good thing is we have a relatively democratic and open society. So everyone can criticize the government without have the threat of being killed, like in the Philippines. Okay, this is something we have. So we can criticize the government if there's something wrong. And we have some NGOs and we have some migrant groups. So this is what we have. So I hope that all the friends from Indonesia, they can have a clearer idea, at least to know my understanding of my country. This is not good, but we are trying to make it better. Thanks.
Thank you, Lennon. Very passionate explanation and answer. We were moved with your passion. Thank you so much. Yes. Now, Mariko, before I give it back to you, there are a lot of things we can discuss on regional. Actually, we would like to discuss more, but time is always the constraints. And one thing which is very interesting in the research is the research on the role of business. Yeah, the role of business, although it is a big business, but they can do something. And that means the recommendation of this research should also be given to the business sector. What can business sector do? Probably even providing with the guidelines. Maybe there's another research to do that. But anyway, I would like to invite Mariko to give your comments of the discussion from your book and the research. Over to you.
Thank you so much. I mean, I think it's been already very, very good discussions, and I don't know what else I can really add. But I think the point that Lennon really raised is very important, and really sort of explain why we did this. We want to do it together. We don't want one country of origin and one destination, and then well, they'll look for other way of exploiting people. So this is something that we really want to work together as a region of countries of origin and destination, as well as region of origin and destination as well. So this is how we really want to use this study. And this is where we launched the report now, but this is really not the end. We want to start from here. We want to maximize this study and how we can work together. And instead of doing the comparison, we want to learn from each other, and we want to learn from each other's experiences and the different capacity of a civil society. We acknowledge that. So why we do that? When we are in a position with more space, civic space available, then we can support each other. So, when there is a situation where some people or some civil society has been oppressed, then the others, we can work together. So that's another aspect of doing this, I think, cross-regional exercise. And I think for tomorrow's International Migrant Day, I want to, remind us all that all these challenges that we faced during the COVID, like all these like limitation on movement and feeling uncertainty about our futures, not knowing what's happened. This has been the life of migrant workers for many, many years. So we need to take this time to understand and recognize all these vulnerabilities of migrant workers and how we can work together to improve this situation. And it's also reflect on other minority communities in our societies as well. So that's really from me. And thank you so much for this opportunity, everyone.
Thank you so much, Mariko, for your comment. Thank you so much. Now we are almost coming to the end of our session. I would like now, before I give to the closing session, we have now our director from the Human Rights Working Group, Muhammad Hafiz, is already here with us to deliver his closing remarks. And before I give it to Hafiz, may I now invite everybody to open your video, and we're going to have one pictures of the panelists and speakers together. May I invite all of us to open it? I've already opened myself. Oh. Okay, even the translator probably. Can we see also your face? Without you, we cannot translate this into Japanese, this discussion. Okay. Who would like to count? Okay. Ifa, Debbie, please come up. Where's your face? Ifa, all the team. Oh, Mr. Adachi is already there. Thank you. Thank you so much. You're staying until the end of the discussion. Okay. One, two, three. Big smile. Okay. Thank you. Let's give an applause for this. All right. Now, at the end of the session, the role of business is important. The role of NHRI is important. Continuous consolidation, solidarity among civil society, cooperation among the two regions are the keyword, to counter the recovery period and to be more resilient, when there is going to be another public health crisis affecting the most vulnerable group of these countries and regions. May I now invite Muhammad Hafiz to deliver your closing remarks. Over to you, Hafiz.
Yes, thank you, Pak Rafendi, for your dedication to moderate this discussion today. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Muhammad Hafiz as the Director of HRWG. First of all, I would like to thank you, express our gratitude for the Sasakawa Peace Foundation that has generously provided us support during last 3 years. And also our partner, our regional partner, Forum Asia, that HRWG is a member of it. Thank you for your support and collaboration on this issue. Yeah, we are particularly in depth, all of our researchers and also HRWG team, especially for Mariko Hayashi as a coordinator of a researcher. Thank you very much for your dedication. It would not have been possible without their persistent and hard work behind the completion of this study. Our deep gratitude also for the migrant workers communities in the 7 countries, who gave us trust and shared their story to our researcher and complete this research. We hope that study can be tool of engagement for the future cooperation between among stakeholders, migrant workers organization, or human rights organization, government, academic community, and other stakeholders, and can be used as a tool of advocacy with the sole purpose of ensuring the utmost protection of migrant workers, especially during the emergency situations such as COVID-19. This study actually is dedicated to celebrate the International Migrant Day 2020, and especially for all of migrant workers in the world. And thank you, good afternoon, and thank you also for the speakers today. I give floor to Pak Raffendi again.
Thank you so much. Please, Iva.
Thank you very much for all the participants and all the attendees who have joined our discussion. And also before I end it, I also would like to remind all the attendees to kindly fill in the attendance list by clicking the link sent in the chat box. So thank you very much for your participation. Good afternoon.
Yeah, thank you everybody. Very big applause to everybody who really contributing to our study and book launch. Thank you, arigatou gozaimasu. Thank you, Lennon, thank you, Andika, Isolda Sechan, Samini, Ibu Nuke, Sodri immediately, Pak Hafiz, of course, Andika, Alin, Annie, of course, and all interpreters.
Thanks.
Yeah.
See you again and
Pak
happy.
Raffendi also, thank you so much.
And yeah, Pak Raffendi, of course. Thank you, Pak E.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you again. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Fumiko
you,
as well.
Hai semuanya. Terima kasih.
Thank you, everyone.
And Mariko, see you again.
Yeah, thank you. Happy New Year, everyone.